Welcome to Double Fries, No Slaw, Sunday, January 12th. And here we are, Richie, fighting against the NFL playoffs, but 1 p.m. That way we can watch a more important playoff game later tonight. Double Fries, No Slaw, presented by Guthrie's. We'll give Bet US, Roback, Garnet and Gold, others some love here in a little bit. But Richie, how's your weekend been?
Good. Yesterday was a very rare, nice and lazy day. Did nothing. Got up early. Went to church this morning, and now we stopped at Publix, and I have a pot of chili in the crock pot that will be perfect come kickoff for the Tampa Bay game tonight. I love what happened the last time we played Washington in the playoffs. It led to a Super Bowl championship for the Buccaneers, and I'm hoping that we have that same thing happen again this year.
Yeah, I loved what happened last time I went and saw this. Us play Washington in person. I went week 1 this year. Different temperatures, bro. I remember sweating my butt off to start that. Like that was what was it? Was that Labor Day weekend? No, it was the weekend after. It's always the weekend after. It was so hot, Richie, for a 4 o'clock kick that I really wasn't close to leaving, but I thought about it. I was like, man, this is miserable. And then I'm glad I stayed because the second half was really great, and we obviously kicked the crap out of them. So hopefully the same thing happens today in better weather. Everybody healthy. Do you see Schefter? I know nobody tuned in to hear Bucks talk, but we'll get to FSU stuff here in a minute. Not everybody, but most people back. A couple of safeties back, a cornerback back, Kate Otten back. That's all good news, right?
No Godwin, but Shepard's really stepped up. Really looking forward to it. I'm just excited, and anyone going to the game tonight can wear a Roback hoodie because it will be prime temperature for that.
Yeah. It's nice to have everybody back. Oh, yeah, that other guy that came back and had a pretty good finish to the game last week. Dude, when he caught that, we talked about it after the game. When he caught that, the whole stadium was louder for Mike's 1,000 yards than they were when we went over.
We didn't talk about that on the show, but again, if people want to hear Florida State stuff, we'll get to it. Just give me like 30 seconds. But it's funny because that's the 2 games a year when the Bucks play the Saints. My wife is from New Orleans. We always watch the game together. And even she was excited for him to catch that last pass because I explained to her what the significance was of that potential getting those last 5 yards. And, even she was super excited for him. What an accomplishment. What a feat. And top 5 receiver of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah. $3 million catch was pretty phenomenal. So shout out Mike Evans. Just please win today, Bucks. I don't want to play this game, but please win.
Don't keep me up till midnight to watch us lose.
Yeah, for real. Double Fries No Salt brought to you by Guthrie's in Tallahassee. You can visit all their locations, 1818 West Tennessee, 2550 North Monroe, 2870 Appalachian Parkway, and then any of their other locations. I know there's one in Thomasville, there's one out on the Panhandle, a couple on the Panhandle, one down here in Tampa. They've got other stuff too. Our owner in Tallahassee also owns the one up there near Clemson. I know we actually do have some Clemson fans that tune in pretty regularly and watch. So there's one outside of Clemson, I think in Hartwell, Georgia, about 25 minutes from Clemson or so. So if you're in or around any of those locations, make sure that you are hitting up our friends over at Guthrie's. Richie, let's start with this. Oh, you know what? You didn't ask me how my weekend was, but I'll tell you. Terrible.
How was your weekend, DJ?
No, it wasn't terrible. I'll take that back. It wasn't bad. But I did have the flu all week. I woke up kind of feeling crappy on Monday, powered through. Tuesday was terrible. Wednesday was pretty bad. Thursday started getting a little bit better. So I finally took a test on Wednesday night because I was supposed to go down to the Orange Bowl. Didn't end up happening. I took a test on Wednesday night because my buddy that I was going to ride down there with, his wife has some autoimmune, just some, she's, I wouldn't want to get her sick. She's fine. Like nothing major or anything that, people are like, oh, is he okay? But like, wouldn't want to get him sick. So I was like, let me take a test, make sure I don't have the flu or COVID or something. And then if it's just this annoying cough, then I'll be fine. Had the flu. So this weekend we did nothing. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't do anything. The kids are bouncing off we didn't go to church this morning. Kids are bouncing off the walls, going nuts. So yeah, it's quite a weekend here, ready for them to get out and get back to school because they were all home the whole week because of no school, or they had school but didn't go because everybody was sick. So anyway, I'm just ready to move on from this, but I do feel better now. So thanks for asking, guys. All right, let's get to it and really get started. Maybe not the longest show, but we say that every week and then go for an hour. So we'll see. FSU not quite done recruiting the 2025 class. They had 3 official visitors on campus this weekend. And I think that they'll probably land a couple. If they could go 3 for 3, they'd be in pretty good shape. But let's talk about them real quick, and then we'll move on. 4-star edge, which, as much as we've lamented the edge recruiting here in Tallahassee, it certainly was better this cycle as they made a couple of splashes the week of signing week and got a couple of guys to flip, got a couple of guys, one from Ole Miss, one from LSU, to join the class. And they've certainly got more talent, more young talent in the edge room right now than I think they've ever had since Mike Norvell has been here, if we're being honest, right? They obviously had a lot of talent with Jared and Jermaine and Kier and different guys that they've brought in. Pat at one point. But this is the best collection of young talent that I think they've stacked. And if they could add Zahir Mathis out of Cocoa, Florida, 6'5", 230-pound defensive end, number 119 overall player in the country per the On3 industry rankings, you'd certainly like to add to that room if you can and continue to stack that talent. I don't know how big of an impact guy he would be this year. I think you probably have a little bit more of that from some of the other guys that you've taken in this cycle. But he has visits to Michigan and UCLA coming up soon. Florida State could add to that room, Richie, and pull him in. It seemed like I watched his exit interview over at Knowles 247. I don't know. I think most of those things are pretty canned, and I don't really pull a lot away from any of them. I'm not like, oh, wow, like we're getting him because of this interview. He's got some more visits coming up. You don't have the last visit. He's probably deciding at the end of this month, beginning of next month. But I thought he said good things about hanging out with Norvell, hanging out with Coach Knighton, and it'll be on FSU to close now. How good of a job did they do while he was on campus here? How good of a job will Michigan, UCLA, others that he's visited do? He was committed to Ohio State for a really long time, decommitted in November, opened things back up. And if you can pull him and continue to stack blue chip talent on the defensive line in the trenches, I certainly think you would like to do that.
Yeah, obviously you'd love to do pretty high 4-star. But star ratings for me, I'd like to look more at what their offer list looks like. What teams are actually going after them? He's visiting the defending national champions next. The potential
For at least a week.
Yeah, he was committed to the potential national champions of this year. That's good company to be in when you're fighting for a recruit, and it doesn't make it easy, obviously. We talked about this before, but with high school recruits, you always want to be the last official visit. With transfer portal recruits, you want to be the first one because you want to get them on campus and lock them down immediately. But I think it's weird because we don't have a new coaching staff, obviously. We have several new coaches on the staff, but it almost feels like you're getting a miniature, new coach bump by having some of these new coaches on staff. I think that's going to be very helpful because, you can say, listen, last year was not what we wanted it to be. However, we brought in all these new coaches and these are their accolades at their previous stops, come play for us. I think that does make it a little easier to sell because there's no way you could have brought the whole staff back from last year. It just wasn't something you could do. But again, if you're competing against Michigan and UCLA and he was committed to Ohio State, that's a player I want. Simple as that.
Yeah. And you mentioned kind of the new coach bump. It's not I think it's not just the new coach bump, but it's also just the idea of coaches that actually give a damn about recruiting. I think that's almost a bigger bump than
100%.
That's almost a newer bump than having new coaches, right? Like just guys that actually care about bringing guys in. At least that's the perception. I don't want to judge. Guys have been on campus for a month. I don't want to judge
It's easy to work hard your first month on a job.
Yeah. Everybody does a good job there most people. I used to work in recruiting, and I know you hire too. Not everyone works hard, but in a job like this, you certainly. So I don't want to judge their whole tenure based on a month, but there does seem to be an uptick a little bit. Not just him, but interior 3-star offensive lineman Chavez Thompson, nicknamed Sandman. Before we go on, Richie, I feel like Florida State could have the all-team name this year when you start to think about the Squirrel. Even Deuce Robinson, you think about some of the names that are on this team this year. Sandman would be a nice addition to that. He's an interior offensive lineman, a center that's currently committed to FIU, somewhere between 6 foot and 6'1", 310 pounds. And not a guy that I think is going to come in and make an instant impact if you're able to flip him, but a guy that Florida State really likes. And again, we've talked about this. Offensive lineman, you need to throw as many numbers as you can at that. And if they can continue to build out their future classes and future bodies for what we're going to bring in, then I'm all for it. So, but again, Sandman, I like the nickname.
Yeah, so I haven't looked in too much on him, but I'm assuming Herb Hand has a prior relationship with him, which is helpful. And
Yeah, did recruit him at UCF.
yeah. So if he does, that's a good sign because he says, you know what, you're good enough for me at UCF. I'm going to take you at Florida State if you're willing to come. I think it's an easy decision for him being an FIU commit. I'm not sure what his other options are, but yeah, let's just hope Virginia Tech doesn't get involved because if they can say, hey, we're going to play Enter Sandman for you every time you step on the field, that might be something hard to compete with. But yeah, you know, again, offensive line, like you said, you just have to throw bodies at that position. And not everyone's going to work out. We've seen 5 stars come in here. You know, what has Julian Armaux done since he's been here? And he was very highly recruited, could have gone anywhere in the country, came to Florida State, and there's still hope for him. So I'm not saying there's not, but it's one of those positions as well where very rarely do you get a true freshman to come in and be an impact player on the offensive line. But he's definitely a promising prospect, in my opinion. I like the size. You know what? You can say he's a little short, but for the interior, I'm not too concerned about
Yeah,
size.
he's fine at
You're like
center.
5'7", 5'8". That obviously that won't work out in major college football. But I do think he's someone that can come in and by year 3 be a potential starter. So again, a good guy to have on campus. And if Malzahn and Hand want him on campus and they're entertaining that, I'm sure Norvell trusts Malzahn, having worked with him in the past. That I have no problem with this.
This is a fun one for our older Knowles. So most people that
Yes.
tune into the show are older than me. So not that I don't remember Cromartie, but Antonio Cromartie Jr., legacy recruit, obviously Antonio Cromartie's son, NFL legend, played at FSU, didn't start at FSU, just some injuries and different things that went on, but obviously was really, really good first rounder. Great NFL talent. Antonio Cromartie Sr. got a Christmas Day offer, which we did mention. We did talk about a little bit when it happened, which was really cool. Obviously, a kid that not necessarily ranked by 247, not a highly sought after kid that Bama and Georgia and everybody are fighting over, but a legacy recruit that the Christmas Day offer said. I mean, he was. I think the family was kind of in tears, when it happened, and pretty excited about it, and obviously dream school type stuff, but not dream school that like scares you off and ends up going somewhere else. If Norvell and staff, fumble this one, it would be pretty bad. But I feel really good about where they're at. Christmas Day offer. I did see, I don't know if you saw this, Richie, but I saw a cool story where Tara over at Garnet and Gold gave some love and said that AJ, Cromartie Jr. had come to Garnet and Gold for a Derwin James signing, and Derwin even commented that he thought AJ was going to be the real deal and would be really special when he was older. He is deciding on Monday. Obviously, I really like the Knowles there and think that that's what'll end up happening. I think he'll end up committing. But with roster expansion and the fact that you can offer more scholarships now allows Florida State to do something really, really cool and bring in a guy that is one of your program's best ever to come in and potentially be on your roster if he picks the Knowles tomorrow. So Monday.
Yeah, I get nostalgia from that. One of my good friends in high school was a Miami fan, right? In my senior year, we would play NCAA, and he would get mad at me because I would put Cromartie on punt return, kick return. He's like, "For his ACL, he's out for the year. You can't play him." I'm like, "Yes, I can. He's available on the video game." But yeah, so that's a name. That's really when I started becoming a huge Florida State fan. I went to my first game in '95, but really in my high school years is when I started watching every single game. I couldn't miss one. Had to watch every game with my dad. So just the name, the nostalgia is awesome. And like you said, he probably wouldn't be an impact player right away, but you certainly cannot question his genes or what he could potentially be. And to get that offer on Christmas Day, like you said, that's a big deal. I remember Warwick Dunn committed on Christmas Day back in 1992 to Bobby Bowden. So I love hearing stories like that. I have a soft spot in my heart for feel good stories. And I think he's definitely a guy, like you said, expanded rosters, more scholarships. Absolutely bring him in. I'd be shocked if he did not sign with Florida State. And I love what Tara from Garnet and Gold. Make sure you guys stop there anytime you're in Tallahassee or shop online. But I love the story that she shared about Derwin James. I think the Florida State Brotherhood is very real. I saw, I think it was Jalen Ramsey quote tweeted a tweet from the about Derwin James getting selected to first team All Pro. I love seeing stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. And again, something that I think Florida State will end up landing. I think they could go 3 for 3 here. I'd probably lean closer to 2 for 3. But I also just got a comment on Ty Haywood. I don't have a great feeling there. We'll see if Florida State can kind of push and jump back into it. But I don't know that they pull that flip off. If they do, then count me into the believers that they
Yeah.
can do anything. But I don't know that I'm quite bought in just on that one yet. But I do think that with the ones that they've got with Cromartie Jr., I think they probably do end up flipping the offensive lineman from FIU, Sandman Thompson, and then we'll see on Mathis if they can. We'll see how big of an impact they made there and see if they can flip him or not. I don't know. I'm not ready to pull the trigger on just that one, but give me 2 for 3 as of right now. Not just high school recruiting. Speaking of Garden Gold, yeah, that's a good time to give Garden Gold some love. GardenGold.com. Richie just mentioned them, but if you are shopping there, make sure you're using our code NOSLAW, NOSLAW, for 15% off of your order. We appreciate all of their support, all that they do for us. The best selection in the game. I was actually on their website this morning trying to look for a couple of different things because it is so cold outside. So probably going to buy another hoodie this week. GardenGold.com, NOSLAW, NOSLAW. They'll get you taken care of. All right, Richie, transfer portal. Let's talk about that a little bit before we go on too much farther. This segment on the transfer portal we'll say is presented by BetUS. We'll give them some love here in just a minute. But I kind of wonder how much more Florida State will get out of the portal. We talked about a couple of guys last week, and obviously I think you pulled in like 5 or 6 commits last week out of the portal, and so a little bit quieter this week. But a couple of the guys we did talk about as potentially being next went other places. Faison to South Carolina. Traylon Ray, the wide receiver from West Virginia, went to Ole Miss. So you went 0 for 2 there. I think Faison was the one that you probably wanted a little bit more, 1,100 plus yards of rushing production at Utah State. He had offers from a ton of big-time programs and ends up picking South Carolina. I thought Florida State had a pretty good chance there. Obviously didn't end up going down that way. But are there additional positions that you like to see FSU attack in the portal? Are there other positions that you think that, I was thinking about this the other day, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the schedule for next year a bit. The roster is going to be so different next year, and there's going to be so many new faces everywhere. It's really hard to know kind of like what you truly have, what you don't have, what you kind of still need, because, you're not bringing 70 guys back from an 85-man team roster. Are there other positions you want to see them go after?
So, after you go 2-10, I think the mindset needs to be what most NFL GMs have, and that is the best player available, regardless of position. Like, obviously, if you have the worst record in the NFL, you're going to take a quarterback number 1 overall. That's just been the trend for years, and I don't see that ever changing. But I do think that the best players at any position, go get them. I think linebacker obviously is a big one. You have a lot of bodies in the running back room, but how good are they? Same with wide receiver. Again, we're in the coming off a 2-10 season. You need help everywhere. You obviously got Castellanos, and I'm assuming Norvell feels good about him. I'm a little more iffy on him and to see what he does. I know he had that amazing game against Florida State 2 years ago. But, yeah, any player that, you're looking for like Jared Verse type players. Now, obviously, you're not going to find a Jared Verse, but players that, were under recruited, ended up at small schools, and end up in the portal, that's who I'm looking for us to try and grab. If a player hops in the portal from, Ohio State, a Michigan, I'm not saying don't take them, but there's a reason they hopped in the portal. And maybe it's a Jermaine Johnson type situation where he was just lost in the depth chart. And he ended up being obviously a phenomenal player at Florida State. But yeah, I think safety is a big one. I think the running back room is not terrible, honestly. They just had a terrible offensive line last year. And I think you do need some upgrades at wide receiver. So I guess that's what my answer would be on those.
Yeah, I agree. More help in the secondary would be great. But also, like you said, like who's out there? Who's available? Like who could you really pull I don't think there's just a plethora of, top level talent, right? Guys that are just, there's not like 6 elite safeties, all Americans out there that you're just looking for. Now, could more guys jump in? We haven't seen insane coaching changes. I was talking with Allie about this the other day. In the SEC, all 16 coaches are expected back next year. That's the first time that's happened since 2019. Now, I don't think that happens next year. But if somebody was to leave a big program or go to the NFL or take another job, obviously the portal would open up for those schools and you might be able to grab something. The portal is open currently for both Penn State and who else lost? Texas. I don't know that an elite safety is leaving either one of those schools that you're just going to happen upon, right? And then same thing, the portal will open up in a little over a week from tomorrow for Notre Dame and Ohio State. Again, are you pulling an elite safety from either of those programs? Probably not, right? And so if a coaching change was to happen elsewhere, say what?
If you are an elite player on a playoff team, you're not leaving the playoff.
Probably not leaving, right? So, yeah, but if coaching changes happened, if coaches left, like we haven't seen the NFL cycle, obviously, go full swing yet, that could certainly impact it. Wide receiver, I agree. I like Squirrel. I like Deuce Robinson. Deuce Robinson is probably your one right now. Deuce and Hakeem, some combo of that. You'd like to see Hakeem take another step. But if you can go out and get a really big impact wide receiver, I think you would. If you can get a running back that had a lot of production, like the Utah State kid, certainly think you would take another swing at that position. I still want to see defensive line depth. Kevin Wynn had a great week at his All-American practices and stuff. I think that was really impressive, and I think that he'll be really good for you. But again, true freshman coming in. You obviously have Darryl Jackson back, and you've upgraded your edge positions, you hope, because they were pretty terrible this year. But I certainly wouldn't mind defensive line depth either. If you found somebody that you really liked there, I think the linebacker room is probably about done. Offensive line's probably about done. You're not going to take another quarterback. I would be pretty shocked if you did. So, yeah, wide receiver, running back, and then maybe safety, like you mentioned, based on what you can get, right? There will be another window in the spring, and I'd expect Florida State to add 3 or 4 guys. Like, I don't think that'll be a shock to anybody, but it's what can you get, right? Like, what's even available? Speaking of I didn't even have this in the notes, but speaking of playoff teams losing someone, what do you think about Carson Beck going down to Miami?
I mean, his extremely hot girlfriend is down, so I don't blame him for that. And his Lamborghini's not going to stick out as much down there as it does in Athens. I don't know how good of a quarterback he is. And again, this is not a shot at Miami because I'd love to troll Miami and Miami fans all the time, but you don't leave Georgia to go to Miami. You just don't do it. So clearly, I think he was told either he was pushed out or Miami pulled a Cam Ward again this year and said, "We're going to pay you, twice what you would get anywhere else to come play for us." I think it's an interesting fit. I think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's elite by any means. And, if he was, he'd be off to the NFL. But it was not surprising that Miami came in and most likely, I don't have any inside information here, was the highest bidder to get him. And they wanted to make a splash because they had a very disappointing end to the season. For all the way through early November, they thought they were going to the college football playoff. Did not happen. So they're saying, okay, and Miami is bringing back a lot of talent. So again, this isn't taking shots at Miami. They're going to have a very talented roster. If they thought he was the best quarterback available, then, good on them for getting him. He doesn't scare me as much as other parts of the roster does heading into next season. We'll talk about that shortly here.
Yeah, I think it's a good pickup, right? I don't think it's an elite pickup. And people say, "Oh, well, you didn't think the Cam Ward thing was elite last year." Well, I was wrong about that, right? So whatever. If I'm wrong about this one too, then whatever, right? Like I can admit that we were wrong. But yeah, I still think it's a good pickup because Emory Williams is so bad that if they'd have tried to roll into Emory Williams starting next year, I think they're like a 6-6, 7-5 team. And I think Beck takes them up to very likely like an 8-4 type of floor. Now, could it be worse than that? Could things like fall apart? Absolutely, right? Like we see that with Miami way too often. But to me, he makes them like worst case scenario an 8-4 team.
So you think he has a 2-game war wins above replacement?
Yes. Yeah, over Emory Williams for sure.
Well,
and
yeah,
because yeah, like I think so. I think for sure. I mean, he's thrown for, and I know he was at Georgia, but like he's thrown for 7,000 yards in over like 2 years and change. Like the guy knows how to throw, and he's very up and down. He's very sporadic. He regressed this year. There's no doubt about it. Georgia's weapons weren't as good. They led the country in drops. Their offensive line wasn't as good. There were a lot of issues with that Georgia team, and he may not be as elite as he was in 23, but yeah, I think he takes them from 6 to 8. And if they get good play around, like that's to me, that's the biggest thing is if he can just be serviceable to good, which I think he will be. I think he'll be a good quarterback. I don't think he'll be a great quarterback, but I think he'll be one of the better ones in the ACC. If he can take them from serviceable to good and their defense can improve, like the defense is the problem. They had a Heisman Trophy guy on the team this year and they couldn't, their defense is what cost them. So if their defense gets better, then I think they'll be fine, right? That Carson could take them up to 8 wins. And then if the defense gets better, yeah, they could win another 9-10 games again. Like that wouldn't surprise me at all. It's the ACC still, right?
Yeah, and this is where NIL has changed everything because Carson Beck at Miami next year is going to make more than Brock Purdy is going to be making it as a NFL starter, who's really good job next year. I think there's like 4 quarterbacks that are starting that make less than $1 million a year right now. If you believe the reports, he's getting $4 million for 1 year at Miami. So Miami, they either are delusional, wanted to make a big splash, or they believe that everybody around him is good enough to get into the playoff and go from there. Because the goal is, if you're Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, yeah, your goal is to win a national title. But for the other 130 schools in Division I football, your goal is just to get to the playoff and see what happens, right? That's what we want from Florida State basketball, which I won't talk about the game yesterday. That was an embarrassment. Just get to the tournament enough times and maybe you make a run. That's how we are with an expanded college football playoff. Just be one of those 12 teams selected. In Miami, they probably do have a good enough roster to make the playoff next year. And if they thought all they needed was a quarterback in Carson Beck, great pickup. We saw Jacob Coker leave Florida State and win a national title at Alabama. And by no means was he, out of this world, but he did what he was asked to do. And it worked out. So it could work out for Miami. I don't think he's elite, like I said, but to your point, I don't think it's a bad pickup. I don't think it was a desperation. I think the money they threw at him might have been more than clearly Georgia was willing to pay if Georgia truly wanted him. But it's a solid pickup, and he's definitely. I'd say Lagway would be the best quarterback in the state next year, and then him and Castellanos would probably be. We'll see who has a better season.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think Georgia really wanted him back. I think that was kind of more mutual. I mean, obviously he declared for the NFL, so it seemed like he was going that route anyway, and then pulls his name out and comes back to Miami, just happened to make a lot of money in doing so. I think he'll make more money at Miami next year and have a chance to rebuild his, as much as we hate them, have a chance to kind of rebuild his draft stock a little bit, which Cam Ward obviously did too, and so I certainly don't think that he's going to be in New York for the Heisman. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 pick like I think Ward will be, but I mean, he could play his, teams are desperate for quarterbacks. I mean, he could certainly play his way into the first round. So we'll see if he does that or not. So
we saw Christian Ponder and EJ Manuel go top 15.
Yeah.
And I love them both, and they were great Seminoles, but they were not top 15 draft picks.
Same with Tebow, right? Tebow was a top first round draft. Like it don't take much to get to the first round of the NFL as a quarterback. So if you're betting on any of the games, make sure that you're doing that with our friends over at BetUS. You can use our code YouTube150 for 150% sign up bonus on your first deposit. 125% on your next 2. Make sure that you're betting with BetUS. All of that up to $2,000. National championship coming up. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Obviously, the NFL playoffs on today. If you're betting on any of it, make sure you're using BetUS. Richie, is it too early to look at 2025? Let's take a look at 2025. I don't care if it's too early or not.
Yeah. We don't need to do a detailed breakdown, but it's definitely fun looking at the schedule because that's where we are right now, right?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a hot take, I don't know if this is a bold take, or if it's just the correct take. Maybe it's all three. I think next year's schedule is easier. And when I break it down and I look at it, I think that we get a little bit of a reprieve. I think we thought the schedule would be really easy this year, but Richie, in 2023, you played Notre Dame on the road in November, who is not only a playoff team, but a national championship contender and participant. And so that's a very tough game. You played Clemson and SMU, who were both playoff teams. You played Miami, who was a top 12 team. They were voted top 12, even though they didn't get in because of auto bids and stuff. But Miami, a top 12 team, you had to play them on the road. UF, when you caught them, was one of the hotter teams. Duke went 9-3, lost their bowl game to go 9-4. But 11 of your 12 opponents were bowl opponents. Georgia Tech, UNC, Cal, BC, Memphis all went to bowl games. The only bad you played one bad team this year, like really bad team, and that was Charleston Southern, right? And so the schedule, I think we thought it would be easier. Hey, we did get that win. I think we thought the schedule would be easier this year. The schedule ended up being pretty tough. Florida State had a very tough schedule of teams that were very, very competitive, and I think it gets easier in 2024. You play Clemson and Miami, both extremely tough. You play UF, of course, and then you have Alabama. But then outside of that, you pick up an extra cupcake with East Texas and Kent State as opposed to playing Memphis in one of those two slots. And then you play a bunch of bottom of the conference ACC teams that started well, finished poorly, teams that were just bad overall. And Florida State was just bad overall. So we don't, I'm not hiding anything from that. But you play more teams that went under 500. You play more teams that didn't make bowls. You played more teams that kind of faltered down the stretch. If you just look at game one, again, is this a hot take? I don't know. I think playing Notre Dame with how good they are this year on the road in November is tougher than playing Alabama with all their problems at home in September. Like as crazy as that is, I think the Notre Dame game, now you might lose both of them, but I think the Notre Dame game this year was tougher than the Bama game will be next year. Now you may still lose it,
not a hot
but I
take.
think the schedule certainly gets easier.
Yeah, that's not a hot take at all. Especially when you think of, probably 90% of Florida State's roster is compiled of guys from Florida and South Georgia. And then, we're cold right now, and it was 44 degrees this morning. That's not cold for a lot of people, especially if you're from up north. One of my my day shift manager at work, like we play golf together sometimes, and it was like 50 something degrees. I got my quarter zip on, I got pants on. He shows up in shorts and a polo. He's from Pittsburgh. So he's like, this isn't cold. This is beautiful. I agree it's beautiful, but yeah, in Notre Dame, again, a really good team. You don't get to the national championship game in a 12-team playoff, especially without being a very good team. They have one of the best running backs in the country. That certainly helps. But yeah, looking at next year's schedule, obviously you get two cupcakes, so 2 auto wins essentially.
Instead of one this year, yeah.
Yeah, instead of one. In Alabama, in Doak, I think they're the more talented roster for sure. But I think Kevin DeBoer lost a lot of favor with the Alabama fan base. I can tell you, they were spoiled with Nick Saban, obviously. But my wife knows a little bit about football, and she's like, I'm not too sure about this DeBoer guy. I'm like, no, trust me, he's a good coach. He'll be fine. But what are recruits saying? They're saying, oh, Bama's not that school anymore. Now I can go to Georgia. I can go to Ohio State. I can go to Michigan, whatever it may be. I can go to Notre Dame now, right? If you're smart enough, which I would never be smart enough, no matter how good I was, to go to Notre Dame. But yeah, just looking at next year's schedule, it's definitely easier than this year. We were both at that game in Dublin against Georgia Tech, and it was just a weird feeling, right? Even when we did our live show from the bar we were at prior to the game, I changed my prediction and said, I think Florida State wins by 3. After I'd, just a few days prior said we're going to win by 7, I think, just because I had a weird feeling that, this is just a weird setup. And I did think that game was a one-off when we lost. Like, okay, we lost on a walk-off field goal. It is what it is. But the next few weeks, things got very real for us Florida State fans. We were very humbled. But I do think it sets up much better next year. And obviously, starting with Alabama, you're probably starting with a loss, let's be honest. But then you have a chance through the rest of September to build some momentum, build some confidence, and I think start stacking some wins to where I think you're at least going to be a bowl team next year, which is so sad to say as a Florida State fan for what I've seen in my 36 years on earth. But I think you're at least getting to a bowl next year.
You mentioned a couple of those games, Alabama, the 2 gimmies. We know about Florida, Clemson, Miami. I think all 3 of those games will be incredibly tough. We'll see what Miami's like without Cam Ward, obviously Carson Beck, you play that game at home. But then the rest of the ACC schedule, I think, is so manageable. You play Pittsburgh, who started this year 7-0, were ranked really high, had their inside track to not only go to the ACC championship, but the playoffs. They lost 6 straight games to end the season. Virginia Tech finished at 6-7. They were 4-4 in conference, just very average. NC State was 6-7. They went 3-5 in the conference. Stanford was 3-9. They went 2-6 in the conference. You play that one on the road. Virginia, again, same thing, 5-7, just very average, 3-5 in conference. Wake Forest was terrible this year. They finished 15th in the conference. You play them. They've got a new coach. They've got just a calamity of problems going on up there for the fastest growing fan base in the ACC, as they like to tout. And so, yeah, I just think you're playing more teams. Now, we may get to this point next year and say, wow, all these teams were better than we thought they were going to be, and they bounced back really nicely. But I don't really buy it. I think you're a pretty good favorite against Stanford, UVA, Wake Forest. You're probably a favorite against Virginia Tech and Pitt at home. And so I think you do. You're hoping the team itself gets a little bit better. That is such a question mark. Well, I think they will be better, but you're hoping the team itself gets better just with all the pickups and the roster attrition and the movement that you made in the portal, the coaching changes, things like that. But you're also, it certainly doesn't hurt to play teams that are a little bit worse. You're not, like you just mentioned, you're not playing 11 bowl. Like when we get to the end of next year, you will not have played 11 FBS bowl teams like you did this season. Georgia Tech, UNC, Cal, BC, Memphis all went to bowls. You're not playing Georgia Tech in Dublin, which is a big deal. Miami doesn't have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback or a Heisman Trophy level quarterback. You're not playing SMU on the road in Dallas. Georgia Tech, a team that was really, really good when they were healthy. They beat Miami. They took Georgia to 8 overtimes. They obviously beat you to start the year. What does UF look like at the end of the year, right? They looked good at the end of this year, but we've seen them be a roller coaster at times under Napier. They were terrible to start the year. Do they flip that? Are they good to start the year and then they tail off some, and so you're playing them at a little bit more of an advantageous spot? I mean, I didn't think UF was really that great when we played them this year. If you didn't turn the ball over 18,000 times and fumble it, I think we just fumbled again. You probably are you were kind of in that game, right? What did we lose by 20? And they had 17 points off a turnover. So you were in that game. So, I think it sets up a little bit better for you. Now, at the end of the day, if Florida State doesn't take care of business, it's easy to look at a schedule on January 12th and say, hey, we should beat this team. We should beat that team. I mean, I need to see how we look against Alabama, right? I will say this about the Bama matchup. They lost 3 times as double-digit favorites this year. I hope that we're at least a 9-point dog going into that game. I'd like to be not double-digit, like 2-score favorites. I'd like to be at least a 9-point dog going into that game. Like, give me that matchup, because I like the streak they're on when they're a big favorite.
So let me ask you this. And the reason, we had, I talked about it a few months ago, we had a little bit of tragedy with our friend group. And my group chat of college friends, who I've known all for 16, 17 years at this point, maybe longer. We made the decision every single year we're going to go to a road Florida State game, but it's not going to be a Miami or Clemson. What game would you go to this year? We did talk about Stanford because I think going to Palo Alto would be awesome. But we're going to Charlottesville for the Virginia game next year.
Okay, so I've been to Charlottesville, a lot of fun, and had a good time there. It was the Willie year that we ended up losing, like right at the end. We had a chance, and I think we were stopped on like the 5 or something.
It was like a repeat of the work done game. Yeah.
Yep. But UVA was fun. We went to a couple of bars up there. We had a really good time, and I had a fun time up at that game. The one I was leaning was Stanford. I just asked Kara about that. Like, would you want to go up to wine country and just kind of like make a week out of that and then go down and do this? But I don't even see him in the comments, so we'll see if I still have but I wouldn't mind Hunter showing us around NC State, maybe going up, if you've already got the UVA thing scheduled, I don't know if you can do 2 road trips in a year or not, but since you're not going to Dublin, maybe we can get you to do 2. I think it'd be fun to go up to Raleigh. Never been there. I don't know how long we're going to be in the conference. That feels like one that'd be a lot of fun. Let Hunter show us around. I mean, I already know that we're going to lose that game in dramatic fashion because that's just what happens in Raleigh. So I'm already setting myself up for that disappointment to have a lead the whole game and then just blow it late like we did a couple of years ago. So, but I've never been. Raleigh would be kind of the easy trip. If I can convince Kara to go out to the West Coast, Stanford would be kind of a fun one too. Her boss actually lives out like 30 minutes from the stadium in Stanford. So that's the one but obviously going to Raleigh is a lot cheaper and a lot easier than going across the
Yeah.
country to Stanford.
But
But
if I
those
did
are the two that
Raleigh,
I'm looking at.
if I did NC State Raleigh, I would probably make a day trip out of it because I've done this before for basketball games at UNC, where I literally catch like a 6 a.m. flight, fly in, and then fly out late afternoon.
For the
Obviously,
next morning, right? If
if
it's a
it's a
night game.
night game, I wouldn't be able to do that clearly. But yeah, I would definitely highly recommend every Florida State fan, if you're looking for a road game and scheduling is pretty easy for you, go to Stanford for sure. You know, my wife and I went to Napa Valley for one of our anniversaries. It was amazing, beautiful, um, ironic with what's going on now, but it was like we left literally like 2 days before wildfires struck in 2017. But just beautiful. If you like wine, even if you don't like wine, go. Trust me, it is California is probably, in my opinion, the most beautiful state in the entire country.
Yeah. Our thoughts and prayers to anybody. I don't know how many people are up at 10 a.m. watching this on the West Coast, but yeah, if you or any of your family are impacted by that, I know that's a different part of California, but certainly thinking about you and all that stuff is incredibly scary. Seeing some of the videos on social media are, I know we get stuff with the hurricanes here and certain people in the Midwest get the tornadoes and everybody's got something where they live. But when we obviously spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about people that are impacted by the hurricanes. That stuff out there with the fire is, to me, so much scarier because like our houses are built to withstand the hurricanes for the most part where we live. Houses aren't built to withstand that stuff. So it is incredibly scary and we're thinking about you. But yeah, Stanford seems like the really fun one. I'll probably end up settling on Raleigh and Hunter can show me around the town and buy all my drinks while I'm in town. So free drink. Listen, I love wine, but free drinks in Raleigh sounds like a pretty good time to me. So
yeah, shout out Hunter, probably one of our most loyal listeners who's a diehard NC State fan. Appreciate you, man, and definitely TJ as well. You would have a good time with him if he's showing you around.
I went to the Clemson game with him this year. Last year. He came up to South Carolina for the Clemson game, and no, we did. We had a great time. Staying out all night before the game, and of course, a noon kickoff the next day was terrible. But hey, we won in overtime, so YOLO.
Shout out Keon.
Yeah. Oh God, go Bills. Do you have any quick thoughts on the playoffs, national championship? Then we'll get out of here.
I think Ohio State's the best team in the country. I've been saying that for the past month or so, but I would not count out Notre Dame. I think it'll be a really good game. I'm sure there's an early spread. Give me your thoughts about the spread.
Yeah, 10. It's 9.5, 10 points. Ohio State favored. I think that Texas kind of showed some ways that you can slow Ohio State down, and that gives me some hope that we'll get a pretty good game in the national championship. The biggest problem to me for Notre Dame is, and Freeman's even already admitting this, is that like they play a lot of man defense, and Texas played a lot of zone, which gave Will Howard and those wide receivers some problems. Jeremiah Smith had 3 yards, and so I think if Notre Dame can kind of figure out in the next 10 days how to play or 8 days now, if they can kind of figure out how to play a little bit more of a zone and limit some of what Ohio State does offensively, then I think they'll have a better chance. That said, I counted 4 drives where Ohio State like stopped themselves. It wasn't necessarily Texas stopping them. They had 1 third down drop by Ibuka that was really big, would have had them in plus territory, potential to go score more. They had 3 other drives where penalties kind of stopped the drive. You go from a 1st and 10 to a 2nd and 25 or something. So I don't know. As good as Texas, I think, played them, Ohio State kind of slowed themselves down some. But, if Notre Dame's got a really good defense and if they can kind of limit it, if they can keep Ohio State in the 20s, they'll have a shot. I would pick Ohio State right now, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think Ohio State wins. I'm just hoping for a good game. It's funny. It's probably 2 of the most hated brands in college football by college football fans. But I think Notre Dame, if they can find a way to establish a run, they will have a chance because they're going to slow the game down and keep it closer to that under. So I haven't seen what the over-under is yet. I'll probably wait till next week to see if we hear anything else because, a player could get hurt in practice this week or, someone could come down with a flu like you or, anything could happen where, I certainly would not bet on this game until the morning of just because why would you? Like, unless you really love Ohio State, take him. Or if you really love Notre Dame to keep it close, I'm just not sure yet. I'm just hoping for a close championship game because nobody wants to see a blowout staying up late on a Monday night.
No, I agree. Fortunately, the kickoff's 7:30, which really means like 7:55 because they never started on
Yeah.
time. But I'm glad that it's not a 9 o'clock kickoff like it normally is. So January 20th, excited for it. Richie, give Roback some love real quick.
Yeah, definitely. Roback.com, RHOBACK.com. Use code DFNS20. That's DFNS20. It will give you 20% off your first purchase. Hoodies, golf shirts, joggers, shorts, anything you can think of. I'm actually wearing a Roback hoodie right now. So if you're too embarrassed by Florida State's season, this is not a Florida State one. You don't have to buy Florida State gear. You can buy something else. I promise if once you buy one, you will definitely go back to them and be a repeat customer. They are some of the most comfortable performance gear I've ever worn. I'm wearing my joggers as well, and I cannot say enough good things. TJ and I do not do business with people who, we don't actually believe in their products. So definitely go to roback.com, RHOBACK.com, DFNS20, 20% off your first order.
Appreciate Roback for their love. Appreciate Bet US, Guthrie's, Garnet and Gold, all of those that we gave love to and shouted out. Richie, what's your pick for the Bucs game tonight?
31-27, Tampa Bay moves on.
Yeah, I've got the Bucs winning the classic. Baker, we're down late with 2 minutes to go. Baker storybook drive to finish it off. Mike Evans game-winning touchdown catch. The Bucs move on. So I don't know if you're going to predict it, might as well make it a fun prediction.
Yeah.
All right, appreciate you guys for tuning in. I know that we went up against the NFL playoffs today, and so numbers were a little bit down. But appreciate you guys that did hang out. We'll have more stuff coming this week, so make sure you're subscribed. We will talk to you guys soon. Go Noles.
Appreciate y'all.